everything else. This is the point I think you're trying to make. I think Ayo brought us a full circle. We link back to what Zahira had started by saying, why do women risk? And all those qualities that she said, exactly what Ayo brought us to, which is the capacity to make everybody feel included and not excluded. Maybe we will open the floor for discussion. If you would allow me to use my powers of the presidency. Just a quick question, and I think it would get some of the discussion. It seems to me that in the civil liberties organization, often the gender is not part of the civil liberties. It's kind of put on the side. We have it in the Arab countries with the Federation of Arab Lawyers and so on. And maybe this is, we should think of it, the issue of gender mainstreaming women as part of the rights movement as a whole rather than just a special one. And maybe, again, the collectiveness that we have in our societies, in developing countries. We have a collective, we are not individuals. We are part of a collective being. Is the same quality that Ayo is using for collective learning, sitting around and learning. So what we sometimes look for, the individualism, might also be the positive aspect of it, this collective learning. And I would like now to open the floor for questions, comments. Yes, please. Yes. No, you have to go over there. Unless, can they move it by hand, Mehna? Just the top? Can it move around? No?
Zach, can we move it?
Thank you. First of all, I want to greet all of you on behalf of 40 millions of our women in the Muslim countries of the former Soviet Union. And that is Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Azerbaijan that I am representing here. I am at the same time the coordinator of that Central Asia region and Asia Pacific Women's Watch. It is, strong movement for Beijing +5. What I wanted to say, I would be happy to give you information about the situation in these countries, but unfortunately we are not in the program. I have no presentation, but I wanted to share with you some thoughts about that. All these countries are coming from the Soviet region, and we have the problem of illiteracy. And women are, beautifully literated there. They have education. At the same time, we are underrepresented now in the decision-making level in comparison with the Soviet period. Why it happened so? You know that in the Soviet period we had quotas for everything. In each organization, everybody, it was totalitarian regime, and everybody have to be elected according to the number of the proposed women with such age, another age, or education. But at the same time, being so educated, we have no women's studies and gender studies. These sciences are not represented in our area. Why? Because in the Soviet Union it was so. We are very strong in chemistry. I'm PhD professor in chemistry. We are very strong in physics and other sciences, but nobody understood at that time that there is such kind of sciences. I am sure in that today, having this experience, that we have to be strong in women's studies and gender studies. And what I wanted to say you that I invite those of you who are so experienced, who are so educated in that, maybe to visit our site. It is a beautiful country and with great hospitality, and we should be happy to invite some of you to organize, maybe to learn something from us. We have great experience, but at the same time, I'm happy if somebody will send us maybe or visit our site to make lectures or workshops and to send us curriculum programs, how to organize the study of the women's studies and gender studies in this region. Because beginning from one country, we shall disseminate this culture all over in other countries. What I wanted to say in the second, that it seems to me that it is time to make for more strong networking of our Muslim countries. You know that I like the organization of Christian women. They have young women's Christian organizations, a lot of them, so strong organizations. And I see that it is good experience. We have to organize ourselves too, but in my mind, religions are not for, they are only for, not for confrontation, but for consolidation of the women from all over the world. We have to think about the moral values that we have in different cultures, yes. And if you, allow me, I shall say that, unfortunately, I had lost this line, but I want to say one, that this region has beautiful cultural traditions, beautiful experience in women movement, and hope that you will have more time for us and will visit us or will be in change of information. It will be useful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi. My name is Afshan Khwaja. I had spoken earlier. I'm from the Islamic Center of North America, Sisters Wing. And I mean, it's great that we have all united here to empower women and to discuss the issues of women. And I think all of us collectively here, I could speak for everybody, that we all want reform with the times, because that's a part of life. However, the problem I feel personally, and I think my colleagues are in agreement with, the problem we're dealing with here is not oppression or suppression of the Muslim woman, but it's the lack of knowledge, the ignorance about our Islamic laws, which creates the discrepancy in our lives. So, and I bring this up again and again because you cannot deal with a woman in a Muslim society without dealing with Islam. They're not two different things. Islam is not something we practice on Sundays or Fridays. It's every day of our lives. So this is why it's so important. And you had talked about family laws, and you mentioned certain things about issues about women having rights over their husbands or they're treated unfairly. But I'd just like to comment on that, that anything taken out of perspective, anything taken out of its context will seem unjust and unfair. But if you look at Islam in its totality, why this law was created, why it's ordained for a woman to be a certain way, men and women in Islam are totally equal. However, they're not identical. That's where we get confused. Man and woman were created different. Not to say that we don't have equal rights or we don't have equal intelligence or equal capabilities. That's absolutely so. That's why there are differing laws for men and women, because we are created different. And it's not Islam which is wrong or suppressive, but
can we, we're not discussing Islam per se
no,
right
we're
now.
not discussing.
That will be a very important subject
Right.
for the for communication networking on it.
But this is,
Right.
though, it is important in the sense we're not discussing Islam here, but we're dealing with Muslims.
Yes, yes, I realize
And you
that.
can't take the two, you can't separate the two,
Yes,
absolutely.
I realize
But
that.
I feel that, okay, we need to educate the woman.
Exactly.
As far
This
as
is the issue.
no, as far as technology is concerned, but hand in hand with the technology, if we educate her by the way of the Quran and not try to take the Quran and make a New Testament out of it, we follow the Islamic laws, but then bring her out, educate her with technology. Let's work on globalization, but not generalization. That's all that I'm trying to say. That, and you know, God willing, we're all in this together, and we all do want to move on, and we all do want to grow and you know, teach our children, but within the limits that God has set for us.
I think the point you're making, which is very good, is that we should use technology for knowledge, and part of that knowledge is the correct interpretation of Islam.
Alhamdulillah.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. Aishima Mbaba, Women's Human Rights. I'd like to pick up on a point that Ayo introduced and Thoraya followed up a bit, but link it also to the things that Aruna was talking about this morning when she was talking about institutional culture. For example, the CLO happens to be a male-dominated organization which happens to have Ayo, who is a woman, as the president, but it remains institutionally extremely male-dominant in its values and so on. And so one of the questions I think that Ayo is going to be asking herself, I hope, is what to do about changing the institutional culture of the CLO so that it recognizes, for instance, that while police violence is very, very important, domestic violence is also a human right and affects thousands more people in any given year than has police violence even under Abacha, for instance. And what to do about an institutional culture within the CLO that means that very many women have been in the CLO and have left it to go on. I think those are important questions to ask about. Why is it that the mainstream human rights movement doesn't seem to be retaining the women, many of the women who do start and work in mainstream organizations? Why is it that they felt in order to do human rights work that is gender aware, they've had to leave and be in women's rights organizations. That's one question. The second is to give an example. I absolutely agree that one of the difficulties, very often, to generalize, that women have is that we tend to be not confident enough about speaking up and asserting rights. But I would like to also present one example of using that, refusing to assert a place as a specific strategy and tactic. And I'm going to take the example of the role that Babab has played in trying to make sure that the TMG, which I also chairs for the CLO, the Transition Monitoring Transition Monitoring Group, thank you, which is a coalition of about 60 NGOs that was started towards the end of the last military regime in order to oversee the transition to civilian rule. And when it first started, it was, 5 or 6 mainstream NGOs, all of them male-dominated, and they looked at themselves and they thought, oh, perhaps we'd better have a woman or two here. So they sent us, Babab for Women's Human Rights, an invitation saying, would we like to join? And we declined to join, but we copied the invitation to 10 other women's groups in order that it didn't have to be us, it could be anybody, so long as there was representations of women's interests, okay? And that worked very well, because then later, the TMG had a much more balanced representation of NGOs who joined it, but also when we got to the point at which the executive was finally being elected for a new term, as opposed to self-selecting, again, we chose, Cindy was the person who, put your hand up, Cindy, the person who was doing all of this at that time. We chose, again, not to stand for a position on the executive, but to use that position of deliberately not standing in order to be able to mobilize feminists and women's groups to themselves stand for the executive, so that now in the TMG there is an executive that is almost 50-50 women and men, and we are hoping that that will be a position from which we can use towards working towards human rights that recognizes that there are women and there are men and their situations are not exactly the same. So it was a deliberate strategy of not taking a place in order to ensure, that other people got places for all of us.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
My name is Farida Laghi. I'm originally from Libya, and I work at the Arab Gulf Fund in Saudi Arabia. I want to build on what Thoraya have raised and maybe go back a little bit also to some points that were raised this morning. I am very concerned at this point to reflect on the whole idea of mainstreaming women in new circles of power. I think, 25 years ago has passed since the first conference of women in Mexico. We all then started to talk, and I think, emphasizing it throughout all the other women's conferences. Let us network, let us dialogue, let us empower each other. Are women fighting women? How we are going really to mainstream ourselves within the system? And I'm afraid to say that probably today, yes, indeed, we are celebrating many achievements, but we have to be also very courageous in facing our big failures. We have been moving very, very slowly. I think no matter how much beautiful are the government reports about the achievements of women in many regions, but still I think the challenges are there, in particular, if we want to go back and to be reminded of the horrible statistics that this morning we have been reminded of. The largest percentage of the poor around the globe are women, the illiterate are women, those who are not in positions of power are women, those who are not in the private sector are women. So I think the dilemma is, here we are talking about technology, computers, internet, fine, good. But on the other hand, what scares us to death, whether as women or people coming from the South, who is going to, or who is controlling today this technology? Is it really going to liberate and it's going to empower, or it's going really to widen the gap between those who have it and those who don't have it, the North and the South, the men and the women, the rich and the poor, the old and the young? So I really think it is a dilemma. And what scares me now, are we going as women for the next 20 or 30 years, again, to sink ourselves in opening a new Pandora box that will take us in dialogue and closed conferences where the majorities are women, 90% or 95%. Like, you know, since Mexico, we have been saying, let us stop talking about each other. Let us stop describing our problem. We already know them. The injustices, the inequalities, the mess, the nagging, we know it. It's a totally new game. So in my opinion, in our region today, at least in the Arab region, it is a very confusing region. I think all of you are, you know, watching the media and what's going on. We don't know whether we are going to have peace or war, whether we are going to have democracy or more dictatorship, whether we are really going to have, you know, real changes or going back centuries back. We don't know. At least something is going to be born. We don't know what it is. So the new agenda of mainstreaming women, in my opinion, has to be in where the circle of power is. And the circle of power is in the private sector and in the political arena. I think we as women have been giving so much energy. Yes, indeed, development is important. Yes, indeed, the social part of development is important. But I think if a wake-up of women awareness is not indeed in these two arenas that is going to determine the future of the relationship and the future of the poor and the future of the women. Because I think Asma and Thoraya, and maybe Zahira would have mentioned that, maybe shifting the agenda to the human agenda, I wouldn't say human right, but to the human agenda. I think that's really, in my opinion, probably the quickest way that we are going to see some change, because it will be very frustrating for the younger generation. I think my daughter is very different from me. You know, the way she sees, you know, totally different. And the way the younger generation are communicating with men in our region is also very different. And Thoraya and our colleague who spoke now about Islam, again, you know, there is a need for a very genuine, serious dialogue among us as Muslim women before we come to the international arena and try, because I am a Muslim, proud to be a Muslim. I might be different in many ways with my other Muslim colleague, but we both have a common agenda, and we are proud of it. And we are not going to spend our time and energy in every conference that we are in only defending Islam. We are not listening to anybody defending Christian or anybody talking about Judaism. So I think in that respect, again, I think, you know, this whole Islamic phobia that the West is using for a political agenda, I think we have to be very careful about it as women. So I just want to stop by emphasizing the fact we have a fantastic new generation coming in the Muslim world and in the Arab world. I think politics and power and money and business, that's where, and I have to tell you that I'm noticing in Saudi Arabia, so many women now are really moving very forcefully into business. Maybe they cannot move into politics, but they're moving into business. So I really think, you know, we have to emphasize that. We have to build on that. We have to mainstream. Women should not be sitting waiting to be invited to be anywhere. We have to go to the human rights organization and say we are interested and we want to be a member. Yes, Thoraya is telling me to stop. I have to stop. But I really think that the games, the strategy, the tactics, the partnership, our friend from the human rights group this morning when she was talking about the role of the actors, they made, you know, things upside down. Maybe we have to bring new players with us who can really have the impact more than we've been able to have it in the last 25 years. Thank you very much. Thoraya, you have been very kind and faithful.
Thank you, Farida. I think you brought a new perspective, which is the private sector, that we haven't discussed it. We did talk about political power, but the private sector is an emerging, and it would fit as a response in the whole issue of globalization. It's the area there. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, you've all been talking a lot, especially the previous speaker, about the need to get into business, the need to get into politics. Those are the loci of power. And all of you have mentioned the importance, I think most of you have, of networking and communication. So I have a very simple question, and I regret that I was not here to hear the morning discussions, but is the new technology, specifically the internet, everything you can do in cyberspace, is this, as the previous speaker said, a new Pandora's box? Is it too early for women in the Muslim world to effectively access it, or is it something that can be actively pursued?
Thank you.
There you
We'll
go.
take one more comment, and then I'll open the floor for the panelists to respond. Yes.
Alia Ressougli, sociologist of culture and producer-director from Palestine. As we talk of Muslim societies, we're talking predominantly and mainly of post-colonial societies with a heavy disempowering and disenfranchising inheritance of those periods, preceded and sometimes congruent with semi-feudal and semi-tribal structures. So I think we cannot talk of Muslim societies ahistorically, as we have been doing for a while today. If we problematize the concept of woman in Muslim societies, we're talking fundamentally about issues of power and disempowerment, having access to power and exercising it, which means then that we have to look at the larger social and cultural field, the continuum of social relationships in our societies, which also disempower men and women. So what we're talking about, and I would like to second with the first speaker, with the previous speaker before, about the human agenda, that we're talking about larger development issues in our societies to change and transform relationships that are based on hierarchical relationships, on patronizing relationships, and on power relationships. And I think these relationships we see reproduced and enacted over and over again in many fields and in many spectrums of our societies. So if we really talk about transformation of women, of the concept of women and the practice and the rights of women in our societies, we see also that institutional structures by themselves are not sufficient, that we have to change some cultural norms, and those cultural norms govern both relationships of men and women. We have Souths and Norths in our own communities. And if we don't transform these kinds of relationships, I don't think that we can make a social transformation.
Thank you very much. Bushra, the last one. This is the last one. Okay.
Very brief comment really on you've mentioned the importance of collective learning, and this is really very important. In our traditional societies, nobody sits to watch television alone. It's a collective activity,
right.
And we can do a lot through the mass media. One of the very important things that we found through our research at Johns Hopkins is that if you get people to talk about what they see, the common discourse on any subject is very important step towards change, behavior change. And we found that gender issues can be really addressed through drama. Political participation of women, women's health, all issues can be addressed to men through indirect messages. And in addressing men and getting men to think about women's concerns is very crucial. So let's not keep our programs and things only addressing women. Men are partners. They are essential partners, and we have to involve them. And in fact, just to tell you a anecdotal incident is that in the project Arab Women Speak Out, we have often been asked by men, why don't you do a project for men on this subject? Thank you.
Thank you, Bushra. Okay, we will start here. Zahira has a few comments to make, and then we'll just go down.
Actually, I didn't have to answer questions because there's no questions. There are, and everybody has had her own comments. The only thing that I want to add, it's, in the speech that I have, it's not opening a new agenda for women. It is just saying a word that we have to be ourselves. It's not that we have to be something that anybody is doing, trying to change us. And when we are talking about change, it's not that women have to be like men. And this is, in the 60s and 70s, all the time we've been, and even the feminist theory, it is all the time it's commenting and criticizing the woman, what now we are talking stereotypes, that it is a negative thing. What I'm saying, it is why we didn't see ourselves as it is. We are women. Yes, we are women. There are something that we are raised on, it has something positive and something negative. Why not to improve the positive issues and be ourselves, not to be changed? This is one thing, and to build on this experience. The other thing, it's really, this is what had Farida also said. We are, most of us are Muslims, and I'm Muslim, and I've been defending the right of my people. But on the same time, if I'm not critical on what is now implemented on me by the name of Islam, then nothing will be changed. Because if we look at all the data that we have, all the numbers that we see in the morning, most of the uneducated women, also it is in Islamic countries. Why? Although Islam is not preventing women from education, unemployment, Islam does not have anything against employment for women. But the problem is how, because of the family law and being the woman depending on the fathers and the husbands, then it is education is not needed, employment is not needed, because there is somebody that is taking care of it, of her. Of course, things are changing, but we have to make the big change in our community by being as women also, not to leave this arena for men. We have as women to discuss it and to be critical on it, and then we have to be in the process. And gender mainstreaming, it is not only in plans and in different other things, it is mainly also in legislations and jurisdictions. Thank you.
I have a, when I became CLO president, I was often asked, what do you as a woman feel, why are you as a woman doing this? How do you feel as a woman being this or being that? And I always found it a little bit difficult to answer the question, because there's a song by Michael Jackson where he said, I'm not going to spend my life being a color. You don't necessarily think of yourself as being a particular thing. And really, sometimes my answer was, well, I've never been a man, so it's not possible for me to distinguish my reaction, which is my reaction, from what would be the reaction of somebody else, whether they were a woman or whether they were a man. And I think that when women are in male-dominated organizations, there are about 3 strategies that they can adopt. One is that they can become the queen bee, and make sure that they are the only woman and the only star in the firmament. The other is that they can opt out and grow their strength in a separate environment and then tackle it at a different entry point. And the third is to stay there and do what you can. There's a senator in the Nigerian Senate who, she's a woman, of course, and at a stage a newspaper wrote that Senator Kairat Gwadabe is always talking about women's rights. Is she the Minister for Women's Affairs? Was it only women who have elected her? She must remember that other people appointed her, which is true. She was entitled to have her interest. But the point is that what could she do? Was she going to opt out? Was she going to be the only one? Or was she going to continue to plow what was at that time her lonely furrow? I mean, the CLO certainly has lost a lot of women. It's lost a lot of people. I mean, the fact is that the Civil Liberties Organization is, we're a bit like somebody who's first in the field tends to end up being a jack of all trades and not necessarily master of all. So that in every field we have lost people, both men and women. And we have a women's rights project. It is in fact dealing with women's violence programs. In fact, the first magazine that we published, which had a picture of an acid victim on the front, was not very popular with the men in the office. They kept on saying, but why did you produce this type of magazine? Well, I mean, people don't want to see this. And the producer, who, as Aisha said, has left, was saying, well, this is what is happening. We can't close our eyes to it. So that definitely women's violence is on the agenda of not just the CLO, but of many women's groups. And in fact, there's a women's coalition within Nigeria, because networking, as has been pointed out, is an important part of what we do. I think with regard to the question of, I can't say much about the interpretation of Islamic laws, because the only thing that does come clear to me is that there are a lot of people who think that they have the only right interpretation. And that this is where the problem lies, that one person's interpretation as the correct interpretation is different. And that when Christians try to talk about it, we almost talk past each other, because, as was said, it's not that Christianity is just a religion that you observe on Sundays, because there aren't really that many rules in Christianity, not because the 10 Commandments even have been reduced to 2. So when, for example, in Nigeria, we are discussing the extension of Sharia law into various spheres, the Muslims are saying, well, why are the Christians complaining that this is in fact, in the Bible, it's even more strict. It specifically says you should stone adulterers to death and so on. And the Christians are uneasy trying to explain why they don't want to be ruled by canon law or by the 10 Commandments or something, because it looks as if they're not being true to their religion. But and on the other hand, the Christians are saying that religion is a matter between you and your God. And the Muslims are saying it is not just between you and your God. So there is a sort of talking past each other, which doesn't necessarily assist. The new technology, I think, it is indeed like a Pandora's box, but unlike Pandora's box, which only had one fairy called hope in it, I think that the new technology has a much bigger balance, and that it's really a case of having to accentuate the positive, as I think the speaker from Morocco said this morning, that there's too much good in it for us to spend too much time worrying about the bad things. There's so many possibilities. I really hope that we would make as much of those as we can. And I think that actually this is part of it. We are doing it.
Thank you. Asma?
Thank you. Yes, I think that even if many of the Arab societies are it is very clear in the constitutions that it is Muslim countries, but family laws and the interpretation of Islam in each country is different. Practices are different. Nobody can say that Islam, the way is Taliban implementing Islam is the same way in Jordan or the same way in Saudi Arabia or in Tunisia. There is a set of values which is very clear in the text of Quran itself, and it based on equality between man and woman, but then there is a set of different kind of interpretation according to the stage of economic, social development in each country. So I think that it's, yes, Islam is there, but for the law as a legislative process approved by the parliaments who are persons, citizens with interest, is different. So I think we can, with full respect to the values of the religious, which is there in the Constitution, but in the details and in the written laws, which approved by individuals and citizens and candidates, is something different, and we can develop and amend these laws toward full equality and respect for each individual rights, man and woman. The other thing is that, yes, women have an interest, and they are the groups, the major group, who have interest in changing toward democracy, human rights, and modernization in our societies, because they are the groups who are not rooted in the structures, traditional structures in our communities. They are not holding the power. They need to hold the power, and the way is changing or rebuilding the structures in a new way through a democratic ways. And that's why I think women have to be involved in all civil societies, but to be very careful and not repeat the same traditional structures, tribal structures within the new organizations. which is still there. There are some political parties built on the tribal leaders. So we have to, as women, we have our own point of view because we need new structures built on citizenship rights and individual rights toward collective rights to groups. The other thing, no, it's not too late for women in Muslim societies to use the internet and the new technologies. But I think it is the opposite, exactly the opposite. Women in Muslim societies needs more these technologies because this is the way to bridge the gap between the situation of women in different areas of the world and our societies, because development in our societies was slow for different reasons, like occupation, like wars, like colonization, or all these kind of reasons which didn't allow our societies to develop quickly. When we talk about mass media in our societies, maybe it's not clear to everybody that most of the TVs and radios are controlled by the governments. So it's not easy to use these tools because we tried to develop some kind of videos and some kind of training visual materials, but we were not allowed to show them through the media. And if it happens once and there was something good on the TV, then the conservatives and fundamentalist groups, religious or even other groups, will make it a big problem. And it happened that many times a good materials was stopped because of that. So we are again under the question of power and political power specifically to be able to use the education to who will educate people on equal rights for boys and girls. We need a political will to provide such kind of curricula and to train teachers to provide a new kind of education. I don't think that also we can the issue. We cannot say that automatically when men are enjoying human rights, women will enjoy these rights automatically. We know that Arab and Muslim women are in the very high position, ministries, members of parliaments, judges, and in all professional areas. But still, there are specific problems related to their social, to the social culture and customs. For example, the Minister of Trade and Planning in Jordan, she is not able to travel without a written permission from her husband. So there are women judges in our country in Jordan, but according to the family code, if a woman works without a permission from her husband, she will be nashes. I don't know how to translate it in English. Yani she is forbidden to work without a permission from her husband. So there is this we have to see very clearly that in our societies, according to the customs and traditions and the patriarchal mentality and male way of thinking and male power, they are still keeping in their hand the lives and they control the behaviors of women in the name of family and the male responsibility to control women's lives, in the private sector at least. So women participation in the public sector is available, but in the same time under the control and of their relatives, their male relatives. So women cannot keep silent and wait until the society give them their rights. They have to struggle, organize themselves for equal rights in the private and the public sector. Otherwise, they will be using by the families and by the society in the development process and in providing their families a better life, but they will not be able to benefit from their work on equal basis and in a justice and fair way. Thank you.
Merci. Alors moi, je vais réagir en français et Hakim va traduire pour moi. Alors j'ai trois commentaires à faire. Je ne sais pas si on en fait un par un.
D'accord.
Alors le premier commentaire concerne le mouvement des femmes. Je crois que de plus en plus, il va falloir qu'on rallie notre combat pour changer les lois et les mentalités. Pourquoi ? Pendant des années, mon association, par exemple, existe depuis 15 ans et on a beaucoup privilégié les lois. Mais on se rend compte aujourd'hui que changer les lois, c'est très important, mais que ce n'est pas suffisant et qu'il faut aussi agir sur les mentalités en plaidant pour la réforme du système éducatif, mais aussi en travaillant nous-mêmes auprès des relais et essentiellement auprès des associations de jeunes, auprès des syndicats, auprès des partis politiques, etc.
Amina thinks that for the time being there is a need for women movement in Morocco or throughout the Arab world to work together in order to change laws and ways of thinking. She thinks that changing the laws, and they have been working for many years to change the laws, the family code in Morocco, but they felt that it's not enough. There is a need to change way of thinking in different by trying to get into being part of unions, other organizations, and that will contribute to the overall work of changing an old way of seeing things.
Alors, la deuxième chose concerne justement la loi islamique. J'ai envie aussi de réagir, Asma vient de le faire. Qu'est-ce que la loi islamique ? Existe-t-il quelqu'un aujourd'hui qui puisse me dire la loi islamique c'est ? Est-ce que c'est la loi des Shia avec leur, je ne sais pas comment ils sont, combien ils sont. Est-ce que c'est la loi de sunnite avec l'école malékite, l'école halbalite, l'école shafi'ite, l'école etc. Est-ce que c'est l'islam du Maroc, de la Tunisie, de l'Afghanistan ? Au Maroc, la polygamie est permise. En Tunisie, si vous êtes polygame, vous allez en prison. Alors, tout est interprétation. Tout est interprétation. Et je crois que la meilleure façon de défendre l'islam, c'est de faire que l'islam s'adapte au temps moderne et s'adapte aux besoins des femmes. Au nom de l'islam, on commet des crimes contre les femmes. Dans un pays comme le mien, la question du divorce, par exemple, est une question dramatique. Alors, si pour chaque chose on dit l'islam est contre, non, l'islam est contre, l'islam est contre, eh bien, on va arriver à un stade où on va dire l'islam est injuste. Alors, est-ce que les musulmans veulent en arriver là? C'est ça la question.
She understands that Asma has addressed this issue of Islamic laws, and she would like to say a few things. One, she's asking, is there really one Islamic law? She gave the example of the Shiite interpretation, the different schools within the Shiite belief of Islam, for example. Within the Sunnite, the different schools of interpretation, the Hanifi interpretation, the Maliki interpretation, and so on. She is talking about countries, Muslim countries, for example, like Tunisia, where polygamy is not permitted, or Morocco, criminalized, and Morocco, where it's not the case, and as it is in other Arab countries. So, can we really speak about one Islamic interpretation? And she is concluding by saying that everything is but interpretation of Islamic texts, and we have to understand that. And we are continuing to, in the name of Islam, to commit a lot of crimes vis-à-vis women.
Alors la dernière chose, elle concerne un petit peu le Maroc, mais c'est en relation avec ce que je viens de dire, c'est les paradoxes. Nous sommes dans un pays où la Constitution a un double référentiel. Dans la Constitution marocaine, l'islam est la religion d'État, mais le Maroc reconnaît les conventions, reconnaît les droits humains quelque universellement reconnu. Donc nous avons le double référentiel. Alors comment ça se traduit? Nous avons un droit positif dans tous les domaines. Au Maroc, on ne coupe pas les mains, alors que c'est dit dans les textes. Nous avons un code pénal moderne, un code du commerce moderne. Tous les codes sont modernes, sauf quand il s'agit des femmes. Il n'y a que pour les femmes qu'on fait référence au référentiel musulman. Alors, je crois que l'essentiel, le problème, c'est qu'il y a une instrumentalisation de la religion pour des raisons politiques et que c'est la religion au secours du patriarcat. Merci.
The last thing that she would like to address is to give you an example of Morocco, for example, where the constitution recognizes Islam as the religion of the state. But in the meantime, Morocco is a signatory of international treaties, like different international human rights treaties, for example, which are universally recognized. So she feels that there is somewhat double reference where in a way Islam is the religion of the state, and on the other hand you are signatory of all of these treaties. She also talks about that all the laws, be it the penal code in Morocco or other laws, are all modern laws, with the exception of family code, where it is still regarded as the sacred. And she really feels that that's, in a way, it's being used to keep women marginalized.
Thank you. I think time is closing on us. Please, Mahnaz, I think time is closing, and I think we need I don't, Mahnaz, only it's a question or it's a comment. I don't think we do not need, let's be very clear, we are not going, un petit commentaire, but we do not want to open the debate on Islam. Let's be very clear. This is not a meeting on Islam, and we do not want to open that debate, okay? عندنا الحق نتكلم أنا عارفة، بس الحق نتكلم في البريك. الموضوع هنا كان أكثر على دور الجمعيات، صح؟ Okay. Mahnaz, you're the leader. Huh? Okay. I think I'll just close this session because I know we have to go. And here I think we should make very clear, and I don't want this to end on any negative notes. We have to be very clear that Islam is a religion and a way of life. This is one. Two, in Islam we say that we want Islam to be the religion of all times and all places. And if we want Islam to be the religion of all time and all places, then many things in Islam, not in Islam as a religion, but the interpretation of Islam, have to fit within the changes that have taken. Changes have taken in the role of men, changes have taken place also in the role of women. And Islam is large enough, is open enough to take these changes as interpretations. One movement that is happening is that there is a call for a sensitization of interpretations, not the text of Islam, but rather the interpretation they were by men. And the issue is, how do we take the text and look at it, how is it kind to women? How is the Islamic text kind to women? This is the effort that we need to, all of us, put ourselves together, because Islam is kind to women, but we need to show how. I think we will do disservice to Islam if in every place we say this is forbidden and this is no and this is no and this is no. We're isolating Muslim women, we're isolating the religion, and we are making the young children also not accepting it. Islam is a religion of all of us at any time and any place, and we need to make it the religion at any time and any place. And I speak this not, I am a Saudi Arabian, I come from Medina, and I'm talking with my heart because it's my religion, I was brought up in it, and because I was brought up with a father who believed in the interpretation of Islam to the benefit of women. and not against women. So with this, I think we should close this discussion on Islam.
Thank you.